The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Again, Jesus left the district of Tyre and went by way of Sidon to the Sea of Galilee, into the district of the Decapolis. And people brought to him a deaf man who had a speech impediment, and begged him to lay his hand on him. He took him off by himself away from the crowd. He put his finger into the man's ears and, spitting, touched his tongue. Then he looked up to heaven and groaned and said to him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. And immediately the man's ears were opened, his speech impediment was removed, and he spoke plainly. He ordered them not to tell anyone, but the more he ordered them not to, the more they proclaimed it. They were exceedingly astonished, and they said, He has done all things well. He makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. The Gospel of the Lord. My dear brothers and sisters, I am thrilled to be back here at Transfiguration, that is, back home. The last 2 weeks I was father over in Europe, but I am very, very glad to be home. And I'm very grateful for all those who had a hand in a beautiful installation mass yesterday. Our 5 o'clock mass really was quite splendid. And I'm so thankful to all those who made sacrifices to make it so. Even more so, I am grateful for all those who had a hand in making our parish fall festival such a great success. It was a wonderful family affair, many, many faces, old and new, and a wonderful spirit of fraternity. So we thank you also to all those who came, all those who spent your money, but especially all those who organized what a wonderful event that it was. My friends, I think we all can ask, couldn't the Lord have healed this man in a more pleasant and more antiseptic way? How does he cure this one? He put his finger into the man's ears, and spitting touched his tongue, and groans. My dear brothers and sisters, this is awfully personal, isn't it? The Lord reaches out and touches this man in a way that is profoundly intimate. He certainly breaks personal space, that's for darn sure. My friends, the phrase to be touched or to touch, unfortunately, but we know that this reality of touching someone and of being touched, at its most fundamental and positive viewpoint and positive reality, expresses our deep need to be touched and to reach out and touch another. Because love, my brothers and sisters, for it to be real love, must involve touch. I do not here speak primarily about physical touch, although that is important. Ask any marital couple, any couple married, physical touch is critically important. But even deeper than that is the desire and the need to touch and to be touched on the level of the soul, on the level of emotional intimacy, to be known and to know the other and all of their brokenness and their greatness. My dear friends, all of us, if we are to be disciples of Jesus Christ, must be willing to be touched, not only by God, but also by one another. And what is more, we must be willing to reach out beyond ourselves and to be about the messy, very difficult and challenging business of touching the other and of being in communion with them. Again, this reality of touch speaks not only to our supernatural life, but also to our natural life. On the level of our relationship with God, we know that we must be touched by the true and living God, and we must reach out to Him. He can't simply be an idea. Listening to sacred scripture and allowing ourselves to be touched by the truths of the gospel, even when they are difficult. It involves striving to be people of prayer, speaking to God about our struggles and listening to His response. in a very powerful way. To be touched by God and to touch Him means that we strive to celebrate the sacraments, and we make the sacraments a part of our regular spiritual life, especially the sacraments of the Eucharist and the sacrament of confession. In the sacrament of the Eucharist, we come together as a body, and we see the presence of the Lord not only in the little host, but in one another. And we receive God. We receive God who comes to us as a form of bread that is crumbly and can be dropped. Jesus comes to us in a form that is profoundly messy. Every part of our life, the stuff that we are proud of and the very awkward, difficult stuff, He wants in. He wants to be in communion with every part of our life. In confession, this reality of touching God and being touched, say, in one level, because we come to God and we reveal to Him the messiness of our lives. We confess to God our own brokenness, our own sinfulness, our own selfishness. We speak it. It becomes out in the open, and God touches us there. He reaches out and touches our deafness and our dumbness. He teaches us and touches us precisely where we need healing the most, as Bishop Cousins spoke so beautifully about in yesterday's installation mass. The sacraments are messy. They're bodily things. Water that can make you wet, oil that will make you kind of smelly and slimy, words that can be spoken by men who are capable of betraying, words that can be spoken by spouses who are also capable of cowardice and laziness. They involve bread and wine that can be dropped and spilled. But then on the natural level, this reality of touch and communion is also experienced and needed. All of us must be in communion with one another if we are to love. We must be willing to be touched by one another and to touch one another. Unfortunately, in many ways, we hold back. We hold back within ourselves. There's a couple of ways that we can do this, that we can refuse to touch and to be touched, that we can refuse to accompany. One way that I have utilized with great effect, if I do say so, is the avoidance of eye contact and bodily language. By the way, many Minnesotans are very good at this. Body language. Oh, sure, we can be very polite, and when our loved ones that we are having a difficult time with, when our colleagues who really rub us the wrong way and whom we have no problem lambasting behind their back with words, when they are present, we make manifest our distaste for them by not looking at them as we answer their questions, by being busy about other things. Make them very much aware, you don't matter to me. I don't want to be touched by you, and I don't want to touch you. It's not so much what we say, my friends, but how we say it sometimes. Do we speak words of love through our bodies that are words of compassion and presence? Do we touch one another through our bodily language? I am here, I am listening, I am attentive to you. Even though we struggle, you still deserve my attention. We must strive to touch and to be touched through bodily language. Another way that we can avoid being touched and avoid touching people is a way that I, again, am very familiar with because I utilize it, much to my shame, and that is through texting. These last 2 weeks, I realized how much I love my phone. I love it. I am so attached to this stupid thing. And I realized as I frantically looked every couple of minutes at my feed, how much this thing I have made into an idol. But what is more, this instrument, which again can be used for good, don't get me wrong, in the medium of communication that is texting, which I very much enjoy and very much use, one can use this medium to keep people at bay, can't we? We can use this medium of texting to make certain that our relationships and our communication is on our terms, our terms. A pastor's life is very full and very busy. So true. But sometimes I will not answer the phone because I don't want to talk, because I want to be about my own business, because I don't want to open up to another person, because I would rather communicate to them in 30 letters or less, and share only what I want to share, and probably more to the point, only receive what I want to receive. My dear brothers and sisters, again, I am not advocating going back to any golden age in the past that never existed. Modern communication can be great, can be wonderful, and can be an impediment to authentic human relationships. And infantilizing. We can become deeply absorbed with ourself and with our cell, which is all about us and how we want to reach out, how we want to be touched. We all need to examine our conscience. How do we interact with one another? Are we willing to speak to one another? Are we willing to call one another? More to the point, are we willing to be there with one another and spend time with them, sacrifice the time to be with them? Finally, I promise you finally, that is striving to be in authentic communion with one another, is through the avoidance, whether it is deliberate or not, of real Christian friendships. A friendship demands that we are open with one another. Not just that we spend time together, that's important, but are we willing to open up to one another and to be challenged by one another, to be in some sense naked before one another, so that we can become what we are called to be. The Christian way of life is not meant to be lived alone. We need others to help us. We need them. We need them to challenge us, to support us, to build us up. The Lord sends his apostles out 2 by 2, because the Christian way of life must be lived in communion. Do you have good Christian friendships in your life? Do you have relationships where you pray together? Do you have relationships where you challenge one another on particular struggles that you are going through? One of the reasons why I am so proud of our various groups, Walking with Purpose, That Man Is You, even our Bible studies, is because they develop relationships. Learning the stuff is secondary. It's all about relationships, strengthening one another, developing friendships that matter. Relationships of touch, where we are emotionally vulnerable, where we share. We share our struggles, we share our joys, and we support and challenge one another. My friends, Jesus could have healed in a much more antiseptic way. He could have. He could have simply said, "You are healed," but he did not. He healed in a deep, profound way. The deep and profound way of communion, fleshy way of love. That is the only way to love. To touch and to be touched. Let us pray for the grace to be touched by the Lord and to bring that touch to one another. To bring that sacrament of love and of mercy to a world that is lonely, to a world that has isolated itself from authentic human relationship, to a world that is longing to be touched.